everyone. Oh,
hi everyone.
Let's go.
Hopefully you can hear us.
1 second.
Okay.
Did it say your stream has ended on your end as well?
Mine says live and this event is being recorded.
Okay. That's good. So it's recording on your end. Hi everyone. Sorry, can everyone hear us?
If you have the opportunity.
Oh, I think Amanda said welcome, so hi.
Okay.
Yay.
Great. It's always tricky when we start off a webinar or an online event to know if anyone can actually hear us. But thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got Amanda moderating the chat. We will start in a few minutes. We want to give everyone just a few minutes to come in and enter. We recognise sometimes people end up ending their workday at this time. So have a bit of chat, please.
Yeah, and it's a new platform, so it's not Zoom, so this is quite exciting for me as well. So if everyone can find the chat, we're just popping in where we're all dialing in from. I think I'm definitely the latest over here at 11:30 p.m.
Thank you for joining us from there.
No worries. Everyone seems to be from Amsterdam. Oh, Germany. No worries. I'm a night owl anyway, so it's absolutely fine.
I appreciate that. Hopefully, I haven't been to Vietnam yet, but I'd love to, even just for the food.
Oh, it's great. I'm very happy being here. So we're going to wait a few minutes, right, for people to make sure they can log on and everything. I hear birds in the background.
It's getting towards spring here in Amsterdam, so we're starting to hear the birds. I didn't realize it was so loud, actually. That's really fun.
No, it sounds really nice.
It is. I don't know if you can hear, I'm originally from Australia, so I need sun, and yeah, I'm here right now.
Yeah, no, we all need a bit of sun, don't we?
Yes, just actually. Yes.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. It's 2 minutes past. I'll leave it to you to decide when to start.
Okay. I'll wait 1 more minute, because I can still see a few people are coming in. I'm with you, Amanda. I'm very excited for this session.
I hope people are having fun with the new platform. You can, there's little emojis.
This is fun. I've never seen this one before. To play with it.
Yeah, we'll see how good it is.
It's always fun to try new platforms.
One more minute. By the way, to let everyone know, this is being recorded. So, do we know how many people registered for the event?
I think that we had somewhere around the 30 mark.
Amazing.
Yeah, so hopefully everyone's able to join. I know things come up last minute. Many people can't, but luckily I think recording it, we are going to post it on our YouTube channel. If anyone watching who has to leave early, so hopefully you can stay for the whole time, because this is an interactive session. But if for any reason you need to drop off early, you can catch up later. Okay.
All right, we're at 17.
All right. Well, how about we can start? We'll start with an introduction before getting into the content. So if anyone joins a few minutes late, they can catch up later. So let's start. Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Gabby Tang and I'm Director of Community for She Sharp. I'll introduce She Sharp shortly, but before getting into that, I want to introduce to you Kim To, who is joining us today to host this webinar called Harnessing the Strengths of Neurodiversity for Tech. Kim is a Certified ADHD Coach and is a well-known speaker on the topic of neurodiversity, and she's very kindly offered to speak to us today on the topic. We have had a lot of interest from our community shown in past events, and so we thought we really wanted to focus on this important topic. And the idea is that we'd all come away from this session having a better understanding of both what neurodiversity means, as well as being able to apply some learnings in our day-to-day life, especially in the workplace. So thank you, Kim, for joining us.
It's okay.
So I'll start by giving you a brief introduction to She Sharp, especially if you haven't been to one of our events before. You might be wondering who we are. So She Sharp is a Netherlands-based non-profit foundation that makes it easier for all women and non-binary people to enter, stay, and grow in the tech industry. And we do so in a multitude of ways. In 4 pillars, we call empowerment, engagement, education, and events. And what that means is we're really focused on creating platforms to enable women and non-binary people who are generally underrepresented in the tech industry to find a stronger place and accelerate their careers. Engagement, one of our biggest focuses is our community. We do that both our events and online in our Slack community. We really believe in the power of supporting one another. Education, we develop a lot of programs. We have our coaching sessions, we have a mentorship program, and we've got a hackathon coming up soon, all geared towards helping everyone connect and learn more. And events. So events like this one, we do them both virtually and in person on a range of different topics, which we think really are applicable for our community members. So this is an example of one of our events. This is our team. I won't go through everyone, but we are a group of volunteers all based in Amsterdam, and we do a variety of things. You can always contact us, find us on our website, shesharp.co, or in our Slack community. And I think I've got one more slide. So this is a quick snapshot. You can always go to our website, shesharp.co, to find the links to all of these. But these are all of the channels you can find us in. Meetup is where you can find all of our events. A lot of our conversations with our now worldwide community are on our Slack channel. And you can always look at our socials to see what's coming up next. So that's a brief update on She Sharp. I'm going to hand it over to Kim now to get into all of the content and introduce herself. So thanks, Kim.
Hi, everyone. No, thank you so much. So I'm going to share my screen. Just give me 1 second. Sorry, trying to see
No worries,
if this works. So share screen. Everyone's waiting in anticipation.
It's adding to the anticipation. I'm sure
right.
we're all.
So let me know if everyone can see my screen, okay?
I can see it.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to present full mode. And hopefully, okay, can everyone see my screen okay?
Yes. Thumbs up in the chat if you can see it. Yes.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I can't actually see the chat now, but it's going to be interactive, and when it's interactive, I'll stop sharing my screen and maneuver the window. So please help me moderate the chat group. So I'm just going to start. So I'm very excited about this webinar, and it's called Harnessing the Strengths of Neurodiversity for Tech. Just a bit about me. I have ADHD. I'm also dyslexic and autistic. Before doing everything that I'm doing now, I was a management consultant as well as a equity researcher turned entrepreneur and now certified ADHD coach. So what that means is I spend my time coaching people who are neurodiverse, specifically with ADHD and other neurodiversities. I'm also a neurodiverse public speaker and trainer, and I also blog a lot. So on the right, it's my Medium, and on there I write a lot about being neurodiverse, being Asian, being a minority, and that's the whole reason why I entered this space, because I just didn't see representation of people like myself talking about neurodiversity when I was embarking on my own journey, and realizing that I was neurodiverse. So in the chat, I would love for people to pop in the chat, one thing you're hoping to learn from this session, or what's the big question that you want answered. And Gabby, I can't see the chat, so I would love it if you can read out some of the comments that we're getting.
Absolutely. I think for me personally, I want to have a better understanding of what neurodiversity means. I think it's only in the last few years that I've started to learn a lot more of the topic. And I manage a team of software engineers, and I'm starting to understand and recognize signs so that I can have a better understanding and empathy for them and make any adjustments that would make it easier for them to work and really show their best side.
Thank you so much for sharing. That makes so much sense. Anyone else in the chat who's willing to share?
Yeah, I will call out a few. So one is, Sulana has said, how to make my work environment more supportive of neurodiverse people. Amanda says, I'm keen to learn how to better support folks with neurodiversity within the workspace as well. Maronia, how to better communicate my needs to colleagues. Chantel, learn how to emphasize my neurodiverse traits in job interviews. I love that one.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Hopefully we will cover that. If not, I'll leave room at the end of the workshop to answer any questions. So let's dive in to what is neurodiversity. So neurodiversity is a term coined to explain essentially differences in brain structure, which influences behavior and the way we interpret information. Now, in the past, neurodiversity was seen as deviant, but now, as we know in the literature and also research, that we now understand it's a natural human variation. So neurodiversity is part of the natural human evolution of the brain. It just means that people who are neurodiverse simply process information very differently because of different brain structure. And this different brain structure could be anything from size of the brain to what areas of the brain functions when they're processing information, to differences in neurons interacting in the brain. So it's all very exciting. But the key message to say here is that it's a natural variation, and neurodiversity should be seen as part of the natural evolution of human brains, essentially. So I've got a little quiz for you, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen in a second, but I'll put up a poll, and the question is, what percentage of the population is neurodiverse? So I'm going to stop sharing for a second, go back to the desktop. Oh, sorry, everyone can see my life. Right, let me put up the poll, and okay, 1 second. So let's put up this poll. Okay, all right. Can everyone see the poll? Perfect. I'd love for people to start voting. Great. Okay, getting there. Right. So I think the population rules. So correct, you are right in that it is 15% of the population. I do have a second poll, which I'm going to start. Right, let's start this poll here. Okay. All right, the second poll. So this question is, what percentage of the creative or tech industry is neurodiverse? Please vote. Ooh.
I love this feature, Kim, of this platform.
Oh, I'm glad you like it. I was quite nervous. It's my first time using it. Great. Yes. So this was a bit of a trick question because as you can see, I've put creative/tech industry. So research has shown that in the creative industry, especially after COVID, a study by the UK government has shown that around 20% of the creative industry is neurodiverse. However, in the tech industry, it's around 20 to 30%. So actually, the majority of you got that right, which is amazing. And this is not surprising because neurodiverse people, as we will know later on in the workshop that I will go through, have a lot of traits and qualities that are very attractive to the tech industry, especially like you mentioned, Gabby, in programming, software development, etc. So I'm going to stop this poll and then I'm going to share my presentation again. Right. I assume you can see my screen again.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So I'm going to go over quickly the traits and challenges and strengths of neurodiversity, then go over why neurodiversity is a strength, especially in the tech industry, and lastly, why accommodations are important to enable neurodivergents to thrive in a creative environment. So the first thing to state is that I wanted to introduce the concept of a spike profile for people. So as you can see, this blue line here represents the majority of the population who are not neurodiverse. And what it means is that their cognitive abilities, so think planning, think time management, think focus, is quite consistent. However, this purple line represents the neuro minority, so neurodiverse people, so the 15% of the population who are neurodiverse. And what this means is that there are some cognitive abilities which come really easy to us, but then there are also some cognitive abilities which we find really challenging. And that simply is to do with how our brain is structured. And I want to present this because I want to normalize the fact that it's okay for neurodiverse people to have this sort of profile where they are exceptional at a few traits, but they're also not that great in certain things. So for example, I have dyslexia and there is just no way I'm ever going to be good at reading hundreds of books. But if you give me an audio book, then I can read, right? But if you give me a book and make me sit down, I cannot finish the book. And I haven't finished a book for a very long time now. But that doesn't mean that, my cognitive functioning is low. It just means that my functioning is very different. So I wanted to show you this as well, because what this shows is that, sorry, 1 second. I need to change this because this is actually something that I'll show you a bit later. So when I'm going to go through each profile, and I'm only going to show you the ones that are the most popular ones because there's not enough time to go over all of them. So the first one I'm going to talk about is ADHD. Around 4% of the population have ADHD, and it's in the news quite a lot, especially in the UK at the moment. The most important thing to say about ADHD is it's a neurological condition which affects people's behavior, and it impacts executive functioning. Now, I've put in this image here, and for me, ADHD is about this dopamine deficiency. So dopamine is a neurotransmitter that helps people focus, pay attention. It helps with feeling happy. So people with ADHD have a dysfunction in this neurotransmitter, which impacts executive functioning. Executive functioning means mental processes, which include planning, focus, and attention. So the symptoms here is that ADHD impacts executive functioning, like I said, and the most important thing to state here is that it is a neurological difference, i.e. it's not something that we can control. A lot of stigma around ADHD is, people think that you just need to try harder, but actually it really is in the brain. So some of the symptoms you will see with ADHD could be, poor time management, problems focusing on tasks, poor planning, impulsiveness, and also self-regulation. So self-regulation here is to do with emotions. So trouble regulating management of stress, low frustration tolerance, frequent mood swings. Now, as you can see, ADHD is so much more than not being able to pay attention. It actually does impact a lot of, daily functioning. But fear not, there's a lot of strengths, which I want to highlight. So the ability to hyper-focus, what this means is people with ADHD can focus deeply on topics that they find very interesting. So if I find a topic interesting, I can focus on it for hours and not take a break. However, if I'm doing anything like admin related, I cannot focus at all. People with ADHD have abundant energy, they're very creative and can thrive in times of chaos, because people with ADHD are quite spontaneous and instant problem solvers. I also put this study here because a lot of study has shown that people with ADHD can generate more ideas compared to people without ADHD when given the opportunity to win a bonus. And what that means is people with ADHD, when put in the right conditions with the right incentives, can actually come up with really great creative ideas compared to the average population. And a study here by Freeman has found that a third of entrepreneurs actually have ADHD. So statistically, we have evidence to show that people with ADHD are actually very creative. And by the way, I can't see the chat, so feel free to comment if you resonate with some of the symptoms, or if you know people, please do share and make it as interactive as you can in the chat. So
before jumping in, I just want to check if anyone has questions. Will we have time at the end for me to ask them, or would you prefer along the way?
No, please ask them along the way. Absolutely. I can't see the chat, so please go ahead.
Okay, I don't want to interrupt, so I'll try to do it at times. We did have a question from Celine. Could there not be a higher percentage of the population being neurodiverse? I think that people who do not experience hard difficulties are as hard as other people being diagnosed.
Yeah, so I absolutely agree with that. I probably have a feeling that the population is neurodiverse population is probably higher, just because as you identified, it's really difficult to get diagnosed, and especially in certain populations like the female population or non-binary population. Those populations and ethnic minority populations are severely underdiagnosed. So I do suspect the numbers are actually higher because the level of people being able to access diagnosis is so low.
Yeah. Great.
Okay.
Thanks for explaining that, Kim.
No worries. Please carry on to jump in. So the next is dyslexia, and dyslexia is around 10% of the population. It's one of the largest, most common neurodiverse conditions found in the population at 10%. Primarily, it's a learning difficulty which affects skills involved in accurate and fluent word reading and spelling. Now, I've put a diagram here because it's just to show you how different areas of the brain is used versus a dyslexic reader versus a reader without dyslexia. And as you can see, an efficient reader uses more areas of the brain versus a dyslexic reader. So again, huge emphasis here on that people who are dyslexic simply have very different brain functioning when it comes to reading and writing and spelling, because different areas of the brain are being activated. So some of the symptoms here is, difficulty with spelling and grammar, could have very laborious reading and writing, weak phonological awareness, which means poor word recognition when you are listening to people. So I really struggle with verbal communication because I'm constantly squinting to try and process what is being said. Difficulty remembering what you've just read or listen to, which is why I really struggle to read books, and can find it quite hard to concentrate if there are distractions, because it's so laborious to be processing all those words and making sense of it. Short attention span, could have trouble coping with stress, trouble remembering dates, names, telephones, and confuse similar words. So I wonder if anyone actually knows anyone who's dyslexic. But yes, so the strengths here is actually people with dyslexia are very good problem solvers. So if you can imagine living in our world when there's constant emails flying about, a lot of our education system is focused on memorization, essay writing. So people with dyslexia have had to develop really good coping problem skills to navigate this world where it is, very focused on words, right? So we are very resilient, very good problem solvers, again, very creative and observant, and have high levels of empathy because, every person that I've spoken with dyslexia has really struggled because of the schooling system. And because of that, we've developed quite high levels of empathy for people. We're also very excellent big picture thinkers. Definitely with dyslexia, there's a tendency to think outside the box, think very differently, making connections between information. I remember information by making it into a story or making it into an image so that I can remember it. And also three-dimensional thinking is a huge trait if you have dyslexia. So hopefully there's no questions on dyslexia. If there is, do jump in. If not, I'll move on. So here we have autism. So autism affects roughly around 1 to 2% of the population. I will disclose and say that if you are diagnosed with ADHD like I am, there's a 50% chance that you will also have autism, because often people with neurodiversity don't just have one neurodiversity, they have other neurodiversities as well, because it impacts similar part of the brain. So I was actually diagnosed with dyslexia first before I was diagnosed with ADHD, and now I'm waiting for my autism diagnosis. So autism is a developmental disability, again, caused by differences in the brain, but this impacts how people communicate and interact with the world. And key challenges are in social skills, in behaviors and speech. Autism is actually one of the, I think, most difficult, misunderstood probably neurodiverse conditions out there, because in terms of unemployment rates, it's around 80% in the population, the autistic population, that are unemployed. And there's a lot of stigma. I guess there's stigma in all neurodiversity, but I think autism, for me, gets a lot of negativity portrayed in the media, etc. And that kind of plays out in the statistics you see in unemployment rates, right? 80% of our community is unemployed, which is appalling. So some of the symptoms include communication and social skills. So finding it hard to understand what others are thinking or feeling. So I've experienced this in social situations where I can be quite blunt with my communication style, and I can't really understand how other people are interpreting it. A lot of our social norms are, especially in British culture, we're all very polite. We don't really say what we mean. And for me, that can get quite confusing. So people with autism can struggle to understand, social situations, what people are thinking, what do people really mean when they say certain things. I don't really get sarcasm, for example. So socializing can be quite awkward for me. That's why I put in can get very anxious about social situations, seeming quite blunt or rude communication style. So I've had multiple managers in the past tell me that I come across quite rude, and I realized I'm not being rude, I'm just being direct. And being direct is also a trait of autism, where you just speak your mind, and I don't really understand social rules about being polite and not saying what you mean, right? So a lot of my feedback in the past has been, you seem quite abrasive, or you seem quite rude. So people with autism can struggle to maintain eye contact, for example. I've put in here meltdowns, which actually should be in this regulation piece over here, because a part of autism is about managing stimuli in the environment. So people with autism are very sensitive to sound, smell, noise, for example, and it can get really overwhelming quickly. So, for example, if I'm in a busy environment when there's networking and it's echoey and there's a lot of conversations, all of that stimuli can cause my body to feel really stressed out, and because I'm processing all of these noises, all of these social interactions, and actually what happens is my body can just shut down because there's just too much information that's being processed, and I can go into sort of an emotional shutdown or emotional meltdown. That's why I put in here hypersensitivity as well as hyposensitivity. What that means is I can be very, very sensitive, or I can be the opposite of oversensitive and try to seek stimulation, which is why you might see people with autism have, repetitive behaviors, might be fidgeting because they're trying to get stimulation from the environment. So I hope that makes sense. Again, any questions, please pop that in the chat, and hopefully Gabby will highlight to me if there are any questions and I will answer them. So there are a lot of strengths with autism. The key thing is attention to detail. A lot of studies have shown people with autism have huge attention to detail. And I used to work in finance, and actually some of the best traders were people who had autistic traits, because they can see the small changes in the data, and they can spend a huge amount of time focusing on that data and paying attention to spot those small changes in the data set. So that's a huge strength. Visual perception, creative and artistic talents, mathematical and technical abilities. People with autism can also have very niche and specific interests, especially if they find something really interesting, they can go deep dive into it and spend a lot of time researching that topic and being an absolute expert in that topic. People with autism are very honest as well. So like I said, I'm quite blunt with my communication style because I speak my mind and I don't really understand what it means to, layer in different ways of communicating what I'm thinking. So people with autism are very honest and actually are very loyal, and they can have very good memorization skills as well as long-term memory skills. Actually, in terms of the tech sector, I think Gabby mentioned there's a lot of studies to indicate actually people who are software developers, etc., have most likely also probably, I guess the best ones probably have autism as well, because those strengths really align to skills such as software development, etc. And I've coached quite a few people who are software developers who have autism and also actually ADHD. So yeah. So here we have dyspraxia. Dyspraxia affects approximately 6% of the population. This is a developmental coordination disorder, and it affects movement and coordination. So how do I explain this? Imagine, if you're chucking a ball and if you have dyspraxia, you might have trouble calculating the time it takes to raise your hand and for you to grab that ball, for example. So that calculation, that instant calculation, might be quite difficult for your brain to process. So that's why I put here impacts a person's ability to plan, process, and perform motor tasks. And it's caused by the brain not processing information properly. So some of the symptoms of dyspraxia includes impacts, daily living, such as coordination, balance, remembering information, and handwriting. People with dyspraxia could have poor posture or fatigue, poor hand-eye coordination. They can be very sensitive to noise as well and have a weak sense of direction. So if you can imagine, just doing daily tasks can be quite a struggle for people with dyspraxia. It probably could take up a lot of energy just to do something simple like going and putting a kettle on, or going and grabbing a pen to write, your grocery list. All of those little mundane tasks which we find quite easy because our brain can process quickly and tell our hands or legs or whatever to move, X amount to pick up this pen, for example, that calculation impacts it severely for people with dyspraxia. So organisation is not natural, and people with dyspraxia can also have short-term memory, and basically just find day-to-day living, quite a struggle. Some of the strengths of dyspraxia, though, is creative and original thinking. So as you can imagine, day-to-day, doing simple things day-to-day can be such a struggle that actually people with dyspraxia have had to come up with creative ways to navigate their day-to-day existence. That's why I put in good strategic problem solving, also very determined and hardworking, highly motivated, and again, emphasis on the ability to develop their own strategies to overcome their day-to-day difficulties. So I've only been able to cover 4 of the neurodiversities. There's a lot more, but I am just aware of time. If people wanted to know more about other neurodiversities, please put that in the chat and we'll have some time at the end to cover that. But now we're going to go to a speed discussion. So what I'm going to do in a second is I'm going to put people into groups of one-on-one, so you'll be paired with someone else. I would love for everyone to have 5 minutes to introduce yourself to the other person. If you are comfortable talking about, disclosing if you are neurodiverse or not, please do. Or if you know someone who's neurodiverse, and you're comfortable sharing that, please do share. But I really want people to kind of start bouncing ideas on what they think, what neurodiverse traits or strengths are relevant to the tech industry. So I've gone through, 4 of the big and most common neurodiversity, neurodiverse conditions, which are often mentioned in the press, etc. So I would love for you to use that information and start thinking about, okay, what traits and what strengths, why are they relevant to the tech industry? Why would it be a strength? So I'm going to exit from this screen share.
Kim,
back into this. Yes.
I'm going to start something for people who aren't able to speak because they're in the office or something or can only watch. Is it possible for them to skip out? I don't know how that will work with your arrangement.
Yeah, so I'm not sure. If people can't talk, would you mind putting in the comment section if anyone who doesn't want to take part, and I'll try and figure out if I can.
Okay, I can give you the names. Otherwise,
yeah.
People could chat. Is there a chat function in there?
Yes, hopefully there should be a chat function. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this. So, all right, I'm going to start the party.
Okay, so for anyone who's there, I think there should be a chat function. Hopefully you can asynchronously, without actually speaking, it's still synchronous, can have a discussion.
Okay, yeah, let's just see how it goes. Right, I'm going to start. Okay. Gabby, was that helpful when you were in the room? Was that all okay?
I found it helpful. I got to meet someone. I think having the one-to-one makes it easy to have a conversation and share experiences. And I definitely learned something in the conversation, so it was wonderful to meet Azu.
Great. Okay. I'm sorry for others who couldn't join. Right. So back here. So let's actually go into it. So neurodiversity as a strength in the tech industry. So I went a bit, all geeks and actually did a lot of research into this. And essentially the key things that I found makes neurodiversity a strength in the tech industry is key traits such as out-of-the-box thinking. So people with neurodiversity, of course, just by pure definition, the brain structure is so different that we do think very differently in terms of thinking about problems or different customer base. So out of the box thinking is something that has been highlighted as a huge strength, and it's huge for a tech industry because tech is about pushing the frontier of what is possible, right? And you can't think about new ideas if you're, I guess, stuck in the confines of what's already been done. So the other thing to state is pattern recognition. Again, I've really highlighted this in terms of autistic traits, but not just autistic traits. I'm also dyslexic, and one of the things that I am very good at is also pattern recognition as well. The ability to hyperfocus. So I've noticed this, with ADHD, but also with people who I coach who are autistic and who are software developers as well. So being able to code and really be focused in the coding, for example, requires a lot of energy to concentrate for long periods of time to find the bugs and to develop code, for example. So not just in coding, but other areas of tech as well, which requires a lot of focus. Hyperfocus is quite a unique trait for people who are neurodiverse, especially people who have ADHD, because it's the ability to be able to be sucked into a task that you can just keep focusing on it until the job gets done. And people are quite confused how people with ADHD can have hyperfocus, but that's because they think ADHD is the inability to focus, but actually it's more to do with, if we are passionate about something, we can, spend a lot of hours problem solving or doing something as long as we're interested in it. Again, high levels of creativity amongst people who are neurodiverse. There's tons of studies on this, and I truly believe it's because people who are neurodiverse are wired to think differently, but also because we are forced to problem solve all the time. Because of the world that we live in, people who are neurodiverse are always accommodating and finding ways to operate in the confines of a neurotypical world. And so it constantly means that we constantly have to develop strategies for ourselves and think about different ways to overcome common challenges, right? Like, for example, reading was a huge thing for me, and I've had to find techniques to read more efficiently or make more efficient notes, for example. These are all like the everyday kind of problem solving that people with neurodiversity do on a day-to-day basis, which is hugely important in the tech industry. High levels of empathy. Again, I told you, being neurodiverse is really hard, especially when you live in a neurotypical world and constantly being compared to neurotypical standards. And this develops a high level of empathy, which is very useful in tech when you are building products to serve different customers, or building products that cater towards a wider range of customers, for example. The other thing, which I've already stated, was insights to different customer base. So an example that I can explain here is Monzo, for example, who recently did a study on ADHD customers. And because of their research, they built in more functionality in the Monzo app. If people don't know Monzo is a online fintech company here in the UK. I bank with Monzo, but because of their research on ADHD, customers with ADHD, they've actually built features in their banking app which help people with ADHD manage their finances better. And ultimately, those features make Monzo very popular with people who don't have ADHD, because these features are useful for everyone. So it's really important to bring in different perspectives and think about different customer base when building tech products and tech services and features. I've put in problem solving. Again, don't want to go into it, but people who are neurodiverse are constant problem solvers. High level of resilience. We don't give up. So people who are neurodiverse are constantly like you said, working to overcome daily challenges. And this has built in, resilience. And again, that is really important in the tech industry when you are building, the next, when you're pushing, I guess, the frontier of what is currently being done. Having resilience to keep going is really important. the investigative nature. So people who are neurodiverse are very curious people. So especially with my dyslexic brain, I'm always very curious about why things are done a certain way. So I remember asking simple questions like, why do we have to use emails? You know, who invented it? Because it's such an inefficient way to send information and communicate, right? Like I would always ask those simple questions, and actually I realized it's quite a neurodiverse trait because we don't see the world as other people do. We really question why certain things are built the way they are because it doesn't make sense to us, right? Like, I'm dyslexic. I would never have built a world where we rely on emails. You know, that's a nightmare to me, and it still is. So, yes, very investigative nature. And the last thing to state is productivity. So there's a lot of studies, specifically a study done on JP Morgan, where they've specifically hired people with autism into roles such as software programming, and found that that population of neurodiverse workers were way more productive compared to people who were not neurodiverse. And that just shows that when you put neurodiverse people in environments that are supportive, in roles that play to their strengths, that they could be very productive and actually add diversity to the workforce. Sorry, I think, Gabby, you tried to ask a question?
No, I was just smiling at what you were saying and agreeing with you.
Oh, great. Okay. Yeah. I can't.
If anyone has any questions, add them in the chat and I'll yell them out.
Yeah, no, great. Yeah, so I'm glad people agree with me. But yes, the last, comment on diverse workforce is so important because we do need people who think differently, and, people who are neurodiverse, like I said, are underemployed. Like I said, 80% of the autistic community is underemployed. And I remember when I, found out I was neurodiverse, I had bouts of unemployment because I found it quite hard to navigate being neurodiverse and, explaining that to my workplaces and being worried about stigma. So all these things actually hold neurodiverse people back. And this is why I'm doing this webinar, to explain to you that it is a strength and we should be supportive of people who are neurodiverse, especially since our community is underemployed. So the last part here is about accommodations and why they're important to enable neurodivergents to thrive in a creative environment. If you're wondering what are accommodations give a person with disabilities, so neurodiversity, at least in the UK, is classified as a disability, an equal opportunity to apply and perform the essential requirements of the job role. So what it means is that you can make changes to the environment or processes to help someone with a disability or neurodiversity be able to apply for the job and perform the job to the best of their ability, given their disability. And some of the key things I've put in here, the first is to develop trust. So you need to develop a trusting environment for people who are neurodiverse to disclose that they are neurodiverse and to actually seek support. Because there's so much stigma around neurodiversity, people do find it quite hard to disclose that they are neurodiverse. And so developing trust in an organization is really important to encourage that disclosure. Addressing the stigma and knowledge gap. Like I said, there is a lot of misconceptions about neurodiversity. There's a lot of stigma. So, for example, when I was diagnosed with dyslexia, a close friend of mine said, "You're too intelligent to be dyslexic." And that was a close friend. So it just shows, people associate being dyslexic with being stupid, or, there's a lot of stigma out there. And I think awareness training such as this and this sort of webinar is really important to address the stigma and explain to people what neurodiversity is and what it isn't. Workplace adjustments. So I've put in here occupational health, flexibility, and also tech and software. So workplace adjustments could be something simple as allowing someone like me who's dyslexic to install a program that will help me, spell check my emails, for example, because I will never be good at grammar. I would never get better at spelling. So stuff like that is very simple to implement and could help someone with neurodiversity, feel more comfortable at work and have more flexibility around their work. And lastly, I've put in tailored and targeted recruitment. So a lot of organizations such as JP Morgan, EY, Microsoft have started doing programs where they specifically hire neurodiverse people into, specific programs. And what this means is they tailor that recruitment process. So instead of, doing an interview, which I find interviews are very weird to actually recruit people, because interviews is more about performance and, how you act in social situations, eye contact. All of that is very hard for people like me who is autistic and might struggle to remember or to recall on the spot, tell me a time when you worked in a team sort of situation. I find it quite hard to recall what I did yesterday, not to mention what I did a year ago. So I always find an interview quite performance-y, and it just didn't make sense to me why we do interviews to hire people, versus these programs that, instead of doing interviews, people could be invited to work for half a day so that people can actually see how people work or do the task. And that way of recruiting people is, would be more suitable, I guess, for people who are neurodiverse. So companies like JP Morgan, EY, and Microsoft have trialed those programs and actually have seen really good results in terms of hiring people who are neurodiverse and retaining them in the tech sector, for example. So the final message I wanted to say was addressing neurodiversity injustice is first addressing stigma, right? So I can't make people care about this, and I can't make people remove their stigma around neurodiversity. So that's why it's so important, like people like you are joining this webinar, and hopefully you can share this information with people in your network and break down the stigma. So thank you so much for listening to me. We do have a feedback form, which I think Gabby and Amanda will be popping to the chat right now. And now is a chance for you to ask all your questions, because I will stop sharing my screen and pay attention to the chat so I can answer all your questions.
Thank you so much, Kim. That was really enlightening. Loved all of the topics that you covered, and it was really great to take those takeaways, especially at the end about things we do. I'm definitely going to look more into that recruitment process because, regardless of neurodivergency, I think that makes a lot of sense. We're starting to get a few questions, so please, everyone, start popping them in the chat. And also, Amanda's just linked the feedback form. So just quickly, we love your feedback. We love to know if the events that we're planning or putting on are actually valuable for you and how we can improve. So one of the questions we have is from Alessandro. Can we have a mix of these neurodiverse types with corresponding strengths and issues?
Absolutely. So as I explained before, people who are neurodiverse often have more than one, and it means that depending on situations or environments, some of these neurodiverse traits could become strengths, or they could become challenges depending on environments or depending on job role. So it is all very confusing and also could be quite contradictory, but absolutely you can have a mix of types.
That's great. If anyone has any other questions, I'm just going to actually go back to what some people were saying at the beginning of what they were looking for and take some questions of that. So someone mentioned something about unmasking at work. I think for some of us who have some understanding, it's quite common for people who are neurodivergent to mask, to appear less divergent, right? But sometimes it can feel a bit risky, I think, unmasking at work. But what are your thoughts or take on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So people don't know what masking is. Exactly what you mean. So especially this happens a lot in women who are neurodivergent, because we've been taught, how to socialize, to make eye contact, how to accommodate for people's needs. And definitely in social situations, I remember overcompensating quite a lot because I really struggled. And so I would drink a lot and make it seem like I'm very sociable, when actually inside I had a lot of anxiety. So masking takes a lot of energy. So to slowly unmask, it is very challenging. I think the first thing is people need to feel like they they are in a safe space with either within the team or even with your manager to start talking about your neurodiversity. Because I think the first step of unmasking is just actually talking about your experiences, and you can't talk about your experiences unless you actually feel safe with whoever you're talking to, that they will keep it confidential. And also if you don't feel safe within your team to share that, because sharing your experiences is very personal, and it's the first step of unmasking and trying to be your authentic self, right, by sharing your experiences. So I think trust is really important.
Definitely. I want to come back to that, but first of all, there's another question from Casey. Are there any support groups or outspoken leaders in this space who can share and create connections?
Yeah, so I think support groups is quite difficult because they're quite scattered based on like countries and stuff like that. But definitely when in my journey, when I was looking for support, I actually gravitated towards Facebook groups. And then slowly I found Discord groups. And then I found LinkedIn, which is huge. I found a lot of people talking about neurodiversity on LinkedIn and became one myself. So definitely look at LinkedIn first. If people still use Facebook, there are groups, but I've definitely started using more of LinkedIn and start following kind of thought leaders. I mean, don't want to plug myself, but you can follow myself and then start making connections that way.
Okay. Actually, Kim, what's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, sure. Let me pop in my LinkedIn and people can start with myself, because once you follow one thought leader, what happens with LinkedIn is you start seeing recommended posts and recommended people to follow, which is also helpful if you're on your journey of discovering neurodiversity or learning more about it as well. So let me pop my LinkedIn in the chat right here. Oh, Reddit. Nice. Haven't tried Reddit yet. Thank you so much, Chantal.
Definitely. Are there any last questions? Because I know we're kind of at time for the end of the event.
I think no questions hopefully means everything was answered.
Yeah, I think we can go follow you as well, Kim, to get more information. Maybe just one last question. Are there any quick tips you have for anyone who is currently wondering, like perhaps as part of this session, they recognize some things in themselves and now have questions? Do you have any thoughts on what we can do?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I would do is start reading about, the traits that or the neurodiverse conditions which you associate with. I would start off with just simple Google searches and then start kind of looking on LinkedIn, on Reddit, like these channels, just to read up about others people's experiences and start reflecting on your own experiences. So I started writing about my experiences before I considered going to a doctor or psychiatrist to consider getting diagnosed. But the first step is to start researching and start reflecting. Also ask your family and friends if you are comfortable, because it's actually very interesting once you start talking to your friends and family. So when I was discovering that I had ADHD, I mentioned it to my friends, and then my friends went, that makes so much sense. You're always jumping from job to job. You're always distracted. It makes sense. So actually talking to friends and family is really helpful as well.
Okay. All right, we'll wrap up. Thank you so much, Kim. I think takeaways, I can already see that for a lot of us, we found this really valuable, helping support ourselves and traits that we might be in ourselves, but also others. And I hope everyone attending has found some value. Please share your feedback. I think if you registered through Meetup, we will be sharing the recording link there. And yeah, please follow Kim on LinkedIn and her other channels. I'll be checking out your Medium account, Kim, because I'm really keen to read some of those articles that you posted.
Oh, yes.
But yeah. Okay. Well,
thank you, everyone. Have a good evening, and I will stop streaming now.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.